Good afternoon, everyone. Is my voice audible? It is with great pleasure. I, Dr. T. Swapna, Department of ECE, welcome you all to the Day 4, Week 2 of 2-week Faculty Development Program on Transforming Education, Integrating OBE and NET 2020. Today's session is on Framework for COPO Attainment and Mapping. This session would provide an overview of the importance of COPO attainment and mapping, explains the concepts, and outlines a framework for implementation. Now, I request Dr. Chandu DS, Assistant Director, Thanks and Accreditation with SEPI, to start the session. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am. My voice is audible, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Slide is visible, sir.
Yeah, thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone, and I welcome you all to the second week and fourth day of the Faculty Development Program on Transforming Education, Integrating OBE and NEP 2020. This part of today's lecture is a very important aspect of the teaching learning process. It is about the COPO mapping. We call it as course outcomes and program outcomes. How do we map them and how do we calculate or measure the attainment? So I'll be breaking down my complete presentation. Generally speaking, I don't have anything to present today in the form of a PowerPoint or slides, but I would like to demonstrate you what are all the important points through some examples. So let's go ahead. There's nothing much to describe in as far as presentation is concerned today. So let's quickly go through. So there are two parts of my presentation. The first part is I would like to talk about how do we map and what are the important points when we have to take consider when we map the course outcomes to the program outcomes. And then the second point is after the examinations, how do we find out the attainment and how do we measure it? I'll not go through this because this was all discussed in the yesterday's lecture. But the most important point is just to have a seamless connectivity of what we discussed yesterday. The basic terminology, the course outcome, what the NAP says and what we do according to OBE is we do the attainment at the end of the course. That's why we need a course outcome. And while coming to program outcomes, that also will be done at the end of the course. Whereas program educational objectives and program specific objectives, the performance or the achievement can be assessed after the first few years after the graduation of the program. So having this in mind, let us quickly go through what it is. So I told you yesterday that firstly, the institute vision and mission are drafted. From the vision and mission statements, we will be inspired to, write or draft the PEO and PO and CO statements. So I'll quickly, from here, I'll just start with some examples. So this is a vision and mission of a university where it says that the vision says that it has to transform the higher education and contribute to the improvement of life by itself by the application of knowledge. So where this knowledge is being applied is to transform the higher education so that an individual, the learner, can contribute to the improvement of the life. Life means in the larger scale, it also means the society. Now, there are three important points in this mission. If we can just break it down, because these 3 points will be able to find them more regularly in the statements, reflect in the statements as well. The first thing is transforming higher education. The second point is contribute to the society. The third point is apply knowledge. So with these 3 things, what the mission is, the short-term goals that we have is to first foster or develop the intellectual and empowered and accountable caring workforce. Once a workforce is created, you can produce some outstanding graduates who are knowledgeable. So that particular word called knowledge appears here, creative and compassionate. Compassionate aligns well with the uh, improvement of life. So what happens when you have a graduate who is knowledgeable as well as compassionate is it will impact the society. So those three terms, society, knowledge, and compassion, are clearly reflected in the vision and mission statements. Having this vision and mission statements, because generally we don't involve, the general faculty are not involved in writing the COs and POs, but I would like to highlight some of the mistakes or some of the uh, things that we have to avoid in the COs, PO statements. These are generally written by and approved by the Board of Studies. So in this process, what is the PEO? The PEO, as I talked about in the yesterday's class, PEOs and POs, they all depend on the competency levels. So first we have to identify what are the competencies that we need to have. So there are three competencies that are identified. The first one is core competency that talks about technical aspects. The second competency is about your employability, that is comes up with professional competencies. And the third one is administrative competency. So once again, those 3 points, knowledge, society, and knowledge, contribution to the society, and the third one is applying the knowledge to contribute to the higher education. So the core competency to apply, this is from a particular branch. As I told you, program educational objectives and program specific objectives are not common to the university as a whole, but they vary with program to program. So this is taken from a program, BTech in electronics and communication. So the core competency talks about application of electronics and communication. So here you must be able to understand what it says. Application is a verb. Electronics and communication engineering is the program as a whole. So there are some aspects that have to be common in a PEO. Without that, you cannot make a statement. It may be PEO, PO, or a PSO. The first important term is the action verb that has to be there. The second term is the subject knowledge. The subject here we are talking about is program educational objective, which is specific or which is narrowed to electronics and communication engineering. And the third important point is in a statement, you must be able to identify that. Action verb, program, or the course. The third important point is what is its achievement level? Is it talking anything about the achievement level or not? Say, for example, I'll read out the statement for you. To apply fundamentals of electronics and communication engineering in their professional practice. Full stop. Full stop. And assume that there is no word about this line. I mean, this entire line is not there in the statement. Just assume. So what happens is there is application and there is a content about electronics and communication engineering. But then there is no utility out of this program educational objective statement. What is the utility? A utility can be there only when you can measure it. So anything that can be measured is said to be having a utility in the statement. So what is the content that can be measurable here? Nothing. So you have to add an extra additional statement saying that to become successful engineer or an innovator or a consultant, manager, researcher, or entrepreneur. So in the first statement itself, you have given a very broad classification of what your graduates can become after the end of the graduation, after their end of their 4-year BTech communication and electronics program. That's what the PEO says. So when do you calculate the PEO? The PEO will be calculated and measured after the first few years of the graduation. So I remember the 2 days talk earlier, which was on research and innovation and accreditation. Professor Srikanth was also highlighting about the importance of the alumni in educational system. So when you have a strong alumni network, then you can be able to identify where your graduates are, and then it will be possible to measure this outcome, the first outcome of core competency. And it will be possible to have a measure of whether you have attained this PEO or not. We will go through with some some good examples of how can this be done in the next few slides. But then let's first understand very clearly what a statement is. The second competency, the first competency talks about you apply whatever the fundamental knowledge of your program has given to you. The second competency is a continuation. After you have become a successful entrepreneur or a successful engineer, you have to be professional and contribute to the society. Contribution and responsibility. So here, let us once again identify the three points, important points. The first important point is the action verb, to use. So usage is the action verb here. And the second point is the course content. What is the course content here? The course is about electronics and communication. So we are talking about electronic systems. And third thing is the utility. Without this utility, you cannot measure any statement. What is the utility here? You will be checking out whether your graduate student were able to develop any electronic system that will be used either for the society or for the industry. The last two talks which I had taken, I was emphasizing on this aspect of regional specific, industry specific, nation specific. So you in the PEO, in the making of a PEO, it is just not the stakeholders that you consider. It is also important for you to consider the national needs or the regional needs, or at least the society needs or the local needs. If you remember and recall yesterday, I was also talking about the importance of having a society member in the IQAC committee. So this, once it is done, you can understand whether the PEO has been achieved or not for this outcome. So the first outcome talks about just being an entrepreneur or just being a successful engineer. After being a successful engineer, whether you have developed something for the society or not. That's the second point. The third important point is once you have reached a position there, then are you able to escalate in your job? Is your program helping you to escalate to the higher levels of competencies? That's when you move from a core competency to an administrative competency. So you have to update and apply. Updating and applying is the action. In administrative skills through higher education. So here we don't find any electronics here, because once you are going into an administrative position, it is less technical, it is less core, and more of applying your knowledge to higher education. This is where this term higher education comes into picture. Are you able to now understand how the PEO is being mapped to the vision? In the first two statements, it was just electronics and communication, narrowed down to electronics. So we were just talking about the improvement of one's life by application of his knowledge. But now in the third PEO, we are now talking about the transforming of higher education by acquiring administrative skills. Acquiring these skills. So this is about the PEO statement. I'll not go in detail with all the statements, but PEO, PSO, POCO, any statement you see from now on in your syllabus, don't take it lightheartedly that it was developed by someone else. Don't take it lightheartedly that you could not understand what it is. It is very simple to break down that whoever makes it or whoever prepares it, they are giving it to you so that you can impart the same, tell the same to the students. You can carry forward the same to the students. So between the BOS and the students, it is the faculty who is acting as a bridge to help them understand how are they actually framed and brought up. Once this is inculcated in the faculty, they also can help the students to understand it, so that this eventually translates into a very good alumni network as well. So once as a faculty, now you have understood that there has to be three terms in a statement. Similarly, let's go and check what is a program-specific objective. These program-specific objectives, 99% of the statements in the colleges or universities, they hit the employability aspect. So let's look at the employability aspects of PSOs. to utilize the basics of fundamental knowledge for theoretical development of complex problems. This is when which helps you to get employment, to perform signal processing methodologies to develop. So because I won't go this much detail as I want to program educational, because PEOs are more generalized. PSOs, because they are more specific, you find more terms that are relevant to your course. What makes a particular student or a learner to become more employable? Those things must be there in your PSO. Once again, without losing the three important terms. The first term is the verb utilization. The second the second word is the content, that is electronics and communication. The third thing is, as I have told you, development of complex problems. So this is a term that you can relate it for measurement. That is the reason why PSOs are also used in the mapping behind the question paper. So once you have given any complex problem for a student in a question paper, then you can definitely put this as PSO1. Similarly, for example, if you talk something about developing an electronic system, which is there here, PEO2, and then which is also reflecting in PSO2, develop some electronics or communication system. So those kind of develop kind of questions in the question paper may be very happily mapped to PSO2. PSO3 also talks about learning adequate tools and techniques for improving the throughput. Learning is a verb. Throughput of what? Communication systems. And finally, where it is being applied or how it can be measured is for improving the throughput, security, and efficiency of various mediums. So this is about, in general, of how to understand the PEO and PSO from a vision and mission statement. POs, they are all common, PO1 to PO12. These POs, as I have told you yesterday, they are divided into 4 different categories based upon competencies. Once again, knowledge, skill, attribute, behavior. 4 different kinds of things. And here, every point of description that is there in this PO must reflect to the points that are highlighted by NEP 2020, like lifelong learning, sustainability. That's also here. PEO7 talks about sustainability. PEO12 talks about lifelong learning. Here, PEO8, if I am not wrong, talks about ethics and moral values in the education. Yeah, PEO8. So this way, we are also in line with uh, the National Education Policy document. So as a faculty, most of us are faculty who are participating here. So let us understand what is our role. It is just not teaching on the blackboard and coming back and evaluating the students and entering the marks, but rather we have 3 important works to do. What are those 3 important works? Let's break it down into 3 different zones based upon the time interval in which they occur. The first thing is before the beginning of a semester, maybe 3 or 4 weeks. I've just generalized it. Some colleges or universities, it may happen even 5 to 6 weeks before. So in general, 3 to 4 weeks before the beginning of a semester, during the semester, and at the end of the semester. What do we have to do? So this is a very basic statement: subject preference form, allocation form, and confirmation. This is all there. But before that, what happens at the academic council? BOS and academic council, they have to remember the title of the slide is OBE framework. So I told you in the last 2 lectures of OBE very clearly that you have an input, process, outcome, and the feedback. So from the feedback, even before the subject preference form is rolled out and the subject allotment is given, a very important aspect is you have to draft your CO statements. You have to keep on changing the CO statements depending upon the outcome. So it is just like a loop. And here, there is a misconception, and we can debate it later at the end of the lecture if you want, that I have seen many universities in which I have worked, colleges I have worked, they do this POCO attainment for the good of accreditation. And after they find that there is no attainment, then an action will be taken to modify or revise the statements. Once they find that the COs are happily attained, POs are attained, there will be no changes to the CO statements. That's good. The curriculum will be the same, I mean, the course will be the same, and then this process continues. So what happens in the next semester when they don't find attainment, then the COs have to be revised. Now my question here is, where is the improvement from the last semester to this semester? Whether you have attained a CO or not attained a CO, it is mandatory as a part of a quality practice to keep changing the CO statements. Now there can be one question. Why should I change the CO statement if I have attained the CO? Let me say CO1 is attained. Why should I tweak the CO statement? Then the answer to this is you need not change the CO statement, but if your attainment level, you keep a threshold for your attainment level. Say, for example, if I write an exam and it is for 100 marks, the pass mark for it is 40 and you have passed the exam. When you write the exam for same exam for the second time, it is your foolishness to keep the same pass mark as 40 because the first attempt you have already passed it. So it is sure that in the second attempt also you will be passing, pretty much sure. So you have to keep updating your benchmark to 40, 41, 42, something like that. So your attainment level for a particular outcome also needs to be updated every semester. Either this should be done, either you have to keep increasing your threshold level every semester, or keep changing the CO statements so that for every year you have seen how the technology is changing nowadays. So as to meet the standards of the industry, you keep changing your CO statements. Either of these must be done as quality practice. And this can be one of the uniqueness of your college because very few people do it. You can show it as your uniqueness in the new NAC format. The new NAC format comes up especially for it gives a lot of weightage for uniqueness in the private colleges. So you can show it as a uniqueness that you are following this particular thing as a best practice. So curriculum design and then those follow. So that's why I've highlighted that the CO statement drafting must be very much given very much attention to it. Because however, the POs won't change. So the CO statement must be doing it. And during the semester, what has to be done? So the syllabus copy will be given to the faculty. What the faculty has to do. So here comes a very important role of the faculty. As I told you, one of the best practices of our university is we conduct a 0th hour. In the 0th hour, we very clearly for about 40 to 50 minutes show the students about what are the COs. That means what are the outcomes of the course, what is expected of this course from you, instead of just getting 80 of 100 or pass mark or something. Beyond marks, what is expected. Second thing is, how does this course help you in a large run after your graduation? That is program educational objectives. So these both, how are they mapped up in the syllabus copy will also be projected in the 0th hour. This can also be one of the best practices at your university. And the second thing is, as usual, execution of your course plan or your lesson plan. This will be done by every university. Every college also has this course question paper moderation and assessments. Here, I would like to take a pause and also tell you two important points about question paper moderation and assessments. There is a misconception here again. The question paper moderation is not just moderating the question paper based upon the how easier or how difficult a question is. I generally do this question paper setting up, for 4 or 5 colleges in and around Hyderabad. They call me and they literally tell me that this question is appearing to be more tough, or this question is appearing to be more lengthier or more easier, or that. But what the moderator has to also ensure apart from this is, are they actually mapping and satisfying the course outcomes and program specific outcomes. So are they actually satisfying them? That has to be also taken care at the course moderation process. I'll discuss about this in very detail when in the next few slides. And after the assessment and evaluation is done, it is important for you to identify the student's competency. I have told you this in my last lecture as well. So generally we call it as continuous assessment test. So I call it as CAT. So after the first continuous assessment, you have to do the result analysis, and then the academic enhancement center comes into place. Identify the slow learner, identify the passive learner, identify the active learners, identify the advanced learners. There are 4 different types of learners in your class. Slow learner is one who has the enthusiasm and also has the ability to learn, but he's slow at grasping the concepts. Fast learner, even before you teach something, he can actually understand and make sense of what it is. He's a fast learner. Whereas there are 2 learners, active learner and passive learner. An active learner is one, and I'll come to passive learner first. A passive learner is one who, even after the examination, even after you come up and take a personal care, he's still very, takes some time in coping up with the course. He's called, or she is called, as a passive learner. And an active learner is one, he doesn't need any extra instructions for him to do well in the examination. So very important for us is to identify these 4 different types of learners: active learner and passive learner. For the passive learners and the slow learners, you actually conduct some remedial classes, give them some tutorials, and give them some simple examples which are actually solved. Don't give them any unsolved examples, solved examples, and then calculate the attainment. Assess them in the subsequent continuous assessment test. Now, you must be able to find an improvement in the marking of the student. This is one way that every institute and every college does it for the passive learners. This is usually done as a quality practice. But added to it, because I'm talking about the OBE framework, where we can have a very good lead at the attainment process. The course attainment process is a second point that maybe generally only few people do. That is formative assessments. So after the end of the CAT, which is a summative assessment, you can come up with formative assessments for the active and passive learners. So identify the advanced or the active learner and give him poster presentation or give him a small mini project kind of thing. Whereas identify a small or a passive or a quiet learner and then help them with some small quizzes or some small interactive demonstrations so that they can be able to understand it more better. So that those kind of assessments, different kind of assessments for different learning capability of the students. This can be a formative assessment because it is not centralized, and then this will help you for attainment as well. So this is a very important point, and this has to be taken care by a unit called, here it is taken care by a unit called Academic Enhancement Center. And then you execute all the other activities. So after the end of the semester, what has to be done? So that is the most important point of the talk today, is we do the attainment process after the end of the semester. Assessment evaluation is done. So you do the COPO attainment and analyze it, and you submit the result analysis. So for you to do the COPO attainment, 2 important points that we have learned is, the first thing is, after your CAT examination, you must be able to identify and conduct these remedial classes or identify the active learners and accordingly give some formative assessments based upon their competencies. And before that, you may have to, even understand your CO statements. This is the same thing that I was talking in the first 2-3 slides. Let's now go to the action verbs before we take an example, before we start taking examples. This is the last slide where I have, after that we'll go to the examples. So there are 6 levels of Bloom's taxonomy, Bloom's levels. I was talking about these levels, but a little modification I have made. so that if you want, you can take a screenshot or you can take this recording later. This will help you to identify some of the action verbs and description for the attainment. What is important for the attainment? So when you are preparing a question paper, it is very important for you to actually map to this or stick to this knowledge levels. There are 6 different knowledge levels. I'm not going to tell because this is self-understanding. Remember, understanding, applying, analyze, evaluate, and creating. In the bracket, I have just explained them in my own words so that you can connect to them. Remembering is just recalling the facts. Understanding is explaining the facts that you have recalled and the contents that are being discussed. Explaining K1, the knowledge one. And once you could explain what the knowledge one is, the concepts and the basic facts, you must be able to apply them in some new situations. So in your question paper, if there is a question called implement, solve, or execute, you are already telling the student that you have understood a concept. Look at here, the description for the attainment. You have understood a concept. Now, how can you apply this or implement this in a different situation? So that can be called as a knowledge level 3. Knowledge level 4 onwards, we generally call them as higher order thinking questions, where the student must be able to analyze and judge, and as well create, analyze, judge, and create. So in the analysis, we must be able to connect the dots. So there are 3 to 4 different points spread across the content of the course. You must be able to draw the connecting dots. You must be able to link up with what was taught in module 1 to what was taught in module 4. So breaking the information into parts to explore the understanding and relationships. This example I highlighted yesterday. So there can be a question on understanding. So do you actually put it in knowledge level 2 or knowledge level 4? It actually depends upon what he or she wants to understand. A new relationship or understanding of the basic principles or facts. So depending upon that, this knowledge level can be used. And after that, any analysis or a case study is given to you, you must be able to evaluate it and come up with some arguments so that you can defend your statements. That is evaluation. And finally, out of all, you design and develop something. Most of our thesis works, which is very higher order of research, we generally come up with titles called design and development, formulation and investigations. So they actually come up with a creating knowledge level. Usually in our BTech or in our general undergrad curriculum, we come up with mostly the first 4 knowledge levels in our question papers. Let's take an example now. CO attainment process. Let's start with an example of a course which has 5 COs. Before the slide, I would like to show you a slide which is this. The CO statements example. Let's take a course which is Introduction to IoT. So what does this course tell us? This course, the title itself tells you that it is just an introductory level and it doesn't require any prerequisites. So now see how are the course outcomes made. I told you yesterday some of the action verbs that we have to avoid. Most of the course outcomes, there is an action verb called understanding. That is really subjective. So we must be able to avoid that. So the first course outcome talks about applying the fundamentals of Internet of Things in the industry. So the first outcome itself, now you have to tell me, or maybe someone can mute and tell me, do you really agree with this course outcome? Someone may unmute and tell me, or maybe in the comments. The first course outcome to a course which is introductory starts with the application of fundamentals of Internet of Things in the industry. Look at the action verbs. I told you there have to be 3 important terms in any statement that you see. So let us learn how to read the statements now. Application is the action verb. Internet of Things is the subject. Fundamentals and in the industry is that's how you measure applying them in the industry. Analysis is a basic verb term. The wireless sensor network is a technical term, and then these both combined will form the measurable term. So now could anyone tell me, introductory level course, the course outcome number 1 talks about application of the fundamentals. So the objectives are very clear here. After the end of the course, the students will identify the IoT devices and concepts of their basic principles. The students can use the application cases of IoT architecture and technology in the industry. Is there any improvement that you suggest, or I wanted to know whether you're
So
satisfied with this?
CO1,
Yeah,
the CO1 directly it is stating like apply the fundamentals of Internet of Things in industry, because it is an introduction unit mostly. The first
yes,
unit would be an introduction unit. So
yes.
making the students familiar with the fundamentals of IoT.
That's perfect. That's perfect. Thank you. So, as ma'am has rightly pointed out, applying the fundamentals rightly at the CO1 maybe have to be avoided here. So, what you have to talk about is making the students to be more familiar. So, what you do is you make the students to be more familiar. The next CO talks about analysis of the basic protocols in a wireless sensor network. Now, I'll show you the syllabus copy of this course. So, what change have we made here? We are trying to, remove this term called application, and maybe, as ma'am has come up with a term called familiarization of the fundamentals. Okay, so here is the syllabus copy. Is it visible?
Yes, sir. Perfectly.
Okay. Now, before you answer that question, it is important for you to actually check at what the syllabus talks about. The first outcome talks about, the module, sorry. The first module talks about the basic concepts, something about differentiation about 2 or 3 different kinds of IoT networks, building blocks, use cases in different industry domains. This module 1 is rather matching with what the objectives were told. But then this CO is not actually satisfying it. Now, if you go and see where this fundamentals of IoT in the industry can be applied, it may be right at the end. IoT applications in the industry may be at the end. So here it is proper for us to make it such that the student gets familiarized about the fundamentals. But let me tell you a very important point here. I'll go back to the presentation. As I have told you, it is a 45 hours course. So the number of hours that are being taught are 45. So it's a 3-credit course. So there are 45 hours. It is not a lab course. It is only a theory course. There is no practical. So it's only a theory course. Out of these 45 hours, how many hours do I allocate to justify the first outcome? So we will talk about familiarization. So maybe the first module and some contents in the second module link up with course outcome 1. Just for example, let me assume. So as I've shown you in the syllabus copy, module 1 was about for 6 hours and module 2 is about 8 hours. So let me say for the student to completely understand or to completely get familiarized with whatever that is there in the statement, CO1, it takes 8 hours. Out of 45 hours, you are dedicating how many hours? 8 hours to CO1. So now, what is the fraction of the time that you have dedicated in your lecture for CO1? It's almost 1/6. Almost 1/6. Now, similarly, CO2, CO3, CO4 also we will try to. Let me say 10 hours, 10 hours, and the other 7 hours that are left out. So I'll say 10 by 45, 10 by 45, and 7 by 45. So 10 by 45 is around 2 by 9. This is also 2 by 9. And this final thing is 1 by 6, for example. Everything must be able, summing up to 1 approximately. So this is your division of your 4 course outcomes as far as time frame is concerned. Generally, this has to be avoided. Even I as a faculty, because of the condition that I have to complete the syllabus. The 4th outcome, which talks more about implementation, etc., will be covering in the 5th module or the 6th module, the last module. By the time we may be having only 2 or 3 days left out for the semester to end. So within 2 or 3 days, I have to completely make the students to understand what it is. So what do I actually teach in the class? What I teach in the class is what actually appears in the question paper, but not what actually needed for the industry or for employability. Where I have to spend 1/6 of my semester time in implementation or in CO4 to satisfy CO4, what am I doing? 2 by 45 or 3 by 45, 1 by 15th of the time in the semester I am spending. So which means 2.5 times with respect to the time frame I'm talking about, I have not done justice to CO4. The question will be given in the exam, because even the students are also very much clever. Whatever that was taught in the last 2 or 3 classes will directly appear in the exam. So they know that implementation of basic applications or something, this needs to have some weightage. We'll talk about the weightage concept in few minutes from now. So he or she can understand that array CO4 say, I should at least have 10 marks in my question paper or 15 marks in my question paper out of 100, for example. So because the student has prepared very well the last 2 or 3 lectures that you have taught, there is 100% surety that most of the students will be able to satisfy this CO4. So after you do and come up with the result analysis, you find that in the result analysis, CO4 is attained. CO4 is mapped to what? PO4, PO9, PO10, PO11, everything is happier. And PSO3 also was satisfied because they are mapped to that. Now the main important question is, this CO4 is talking about implementation of IoT on an embedded platform. And if you just go back and see where the term implement is coming here, the term implement comes in applying this third level of knowledge level. And because he or she has to implement in an embedded platform, they have to design a particular IoT network when they go for a job. So now tell me, will they be able to design anything? Will it actually result in any employability? Your PEO doesn't get satisfied because of this. So short-term goal, your COs and POs will get satisfied or will get attained, but the PEO may not be attained because of the reason that the time frame was not satisfied. So this very few people will highlight about this issue. So I wanted to highlight this much before I talk more about attainment and all these things. It is very important for a faculty to maintain the timeline, especially as far as COs are concerned. Make sure that 3 or 4 weeks before the semester begins itself, that this much time is for this CO, this much time is for this CO. The more amount of time you spend, the more amount of discussion and assessment and examinations will happen based upon that particular outcome. Okay. This is the first important point that you have to think about. The second point that you have to take care is about the weightages of these COs. So first point, I've talked about the timeline. Second point, let me talk about the weightages of the COs. For this, let me go and demonstrate. Are you able to see this sheet here?
Yes, sir. Sheet, yes.
So this is an attainment template that we usually follow. I wanted to, discuss something from here. So this is for 23-24 winter, which has recently ended. The course is Introduction to IoT, the same course. For your demonstration purpose, I'm just taking 8 students in my class for the simplicity of demonstration. Now, in a university setup, let me assume a university has 2 continuous assessment tests, which are for 50 marks and 50 marks. And their weightage is 30% and 30%. So the weightage for continuous assessment is 30-30. And there is a semester end examination, which is conducted for 100 marks, and its weightage is 40. So here you have 30%, here you have 40%, total 70%. And I told you yesterday, and once again I am re-emphasizing it, the other 30 marks, depending upon the autonomy and depending upon what your university or college follows, these 30 or minimum 20 marks will definitely be there for internal assessment. You please try to make them as more formative and as much as interactive and as much as employability skill triggering as possible, rather than giving the same question again in the internal assessment. Okay, for whatever, this is for 30 marks. So here you have a total weightage of 100. Now, it is very important for the faculty as well as for the moderator and for the deans or school heads to ensure that this course has 4 outcomes, right? All these 4 outcomes must result or must appear in not all the examinations, but in any of the examinations. So if I say CO1, for example, explanation of, yeah.
Excuse me, sir. Sir, is it like we have to write one CO per unit, or do we have to is there any limit on COs?
No, there is no limit
sir, we
on
have
COs.
5 units, sir. 5 units
Okay.
we have. So generally what we do is 5 units and 5 COs we write.
Ma'am, this 5 unit, 5 COs, N units proportional to N COs is a thing that is made for easing your task.
Yes, sir.
But rather, a CO, an outcome must actually need not reflect directly from the module, but over the entire course. If you break up into 5 different modules, what are the 5 different outcomes that you expect? If your course has 5 modules, it's okay if you have 4 outcomes. If your course has 6 modules, even it's okay if you have 4 outcomes. A course with 4 modules and having 5 outcomes is also appreciated.
Thank you, sir.
Generally, this is followed for n number of modules. So whatever the module talks about, you generally put it as a outcome. That can also be done, but that oversimplifies the task. There is no problem with that as well. And one more point, because you have asked this question. It is not suggestible to take more than 5 COs or less than 4 COs. 4 COs is an appropriate term. 5 is also okay. But then those 5 need not be straight away taken from the module. Okay, so any one CO you pick up, for example, the moderator or whoever is looking after the examination process must ensure that you have at least one question from this CO in any of the assessment tests. So if I give 0 marks here, it's okay. If I don't give anything from CAT 2, it is okay. If I don't give anything from internal assessment, is okay. But it is not okay if I don't give anything here as well. At least in any one of the tests, you must be able to ensure that there is one question from the CO. So, following up on Madam's question, if you take up one module for one CO, generally the first 2 modules, you categorize it for your first internal exam or whatever. The next 2 modules, you categorize it for the next internal. Overall, your course, you will categorize it for your end semester exam. Now, here comes a very important point. I'm just hinting you. You please try to understand this. 5 COs are there. 5 modules are there. The end semester exam, and how you have prepared these 5 COs based upon 5 modules. The problem here is, the advantage is it's very simple. The problem here is the 5th module is corresponding to the 5th outcome. This 5th outcome you have not touched in the first 3 assessments, either in CAT 1 or CAT 2 or internal assessment. So definitely this 5th CO you have to give a lot of weightage to it in the final assessment test, or else what happens, all these 5 outcomes, it essentially means that you have not given an equal weightage to it. The weightage was not distributed equally. So there happens a little bit of a problem on the how you distribute your marks. So that's one point about having n modules directly, n outcomes like that. So anyhow, so that's another important point where every module, sorry, not module, every outcome must be in any one of the questions. So now I have randomly put some marks here where CAT 1, for example, it is evaluated for 50 marks, as I have told you. So let me say the first outcome, the number of questions that I ask in the first outcome are total 15. So as madam has told, familiarization of the concepts or explaining the concepts, anything is the same. So we have avoided the term application. So explanation of the concepts of Internet of Things. So that is evaluated for 15 marks. So now, because your course is more introductory course, the internal assessment was for 10 marks and the outcomes in the, the marks in the fact was for 25 marks. So if you sum up totally 25 plus 45, 25 plus 25, 50 marks were given from this outcome. So you can just make a note that 50 marks are allocated from this outcome across the different assessments that I have taken in this semester. Analyze the next outcome. As the outcome increases, the number of marks that you have put were also more, so that here you have given 60 marks for this assessment. Next, the design aspect, which talks more about the knowledge level 3 and knowledge level 4, and corresponds to outcome number 3. Here, the total number of marks that are attributed to this are 40 plus 25, that is 65. Slowly, the number is increasing because you want more about employability aspect. So implement the basic, as I have told you, implement, design, develop, or create. So 20 plus 30, 20 plus 10, 30 plus 25, this is 55. So this is how you give the total number of mark distribution. And if you see, the more weightage is coming from CO2 and CO3, the bulk is from the outcome 2 and outcome 3. And for fair distribution, I have given equal weightage to all the modules in the fact. This is just a demonstration, okay? For fair weightage, equal marks were given for all the outcomes in this. Generally, what we do is we prepare equal, every module must have equal weightage in the end exam. But a more preferable approach as far as employability and PEO mapping is concerned is every outcome must have equal weightage. So in that sense, I have prepared this for the final exam. And now, because your continuous assessment tests and the internal examinations are generally, the rigor and the intense will be a little less, I have given the threshold to be 70. What does this 70 mean? I am conducting an exam for 50 marks. How many of my students have got more than 35 marks is my threshold. So I say that the first CO is attained. I say that the first CO is attained if, what is the first CO? Explaining the concepts of Internet of Things, is attained if my students, 50% of my students get more than 70% of marks. So there are 8 students in my class. So at least 4 of them must be able to get 35, 35, 35 like that, more than 35 like that. So that is the threshold that I have put. This threshold can be put, well, actually fixed by the course coordinators if you have, or maybe the department heads, or whoever is framing this syllabus. They can put this threshold. Simply for demonstration purpose, I have put 70. You can put 50 or 60 or whatever, depending upon the intensity of the course and the demands of your college or university. Whereas the final exam test, most of the affiliated colleges and the universities also, the question paper comes from others, so other will set the question paper for you. So the intensity will be a little more. So the threshold is kept very less. So here we have 3 levels of attainment. What are those 3 levels of attainment? The 3 levels of attainment are level 1, level 2, and level 3. So if you entirely put the target as 50%, then level 1 talks about 50 minus 10, that is 40. Level 2 talks about 50 plus 10, that is 60. And level 3 is anything above 60. So how do we understand this? The target is 50%. So 50% of the students have got more than 60% of marks for that particular CO. Then you will be telling that CO has attained level 3. If only in between 50 to 40 have achieved that particular mark, then you will be saying that it is level 2. Or if less than 40% of the students have got more than 50. So if you take 8 students in the class, 40% of 8 is roughly 3. So only 3 students or less than 3 students have got 50% marks for that particular CO. So then you will say that it is level 1. So level 1, level 2 and level 3. So anything that comes under level 1, you say that you have not attained the CO, and then you have to remodify and rework on the statements. Anything that is there in level 2 and level 3, as I told earlier, you may have to increase your thresholds or increase your attainment levels. So for example, here is the scores. I have just roughly put these scores for 8 different students in the class for all the assessment tests that I have talked about. So here, if you see for CO1, where does the CO1 reflect? The CO1 doesn't reflect in CAT2 at all, but it reflects in CAT1, internal assessment and FAT. So what is the total weightage here? 15, 10 and 25. So now if you observe here, I've taken one student. We'll only see CAT1, internal and FAT because CO1 is dependent only on these 3 functions. Look at here. There is 1, 1 and 1. So definitely this is not even 50%. So you can definitely say that this student has not attained CO1. So one student has not attained this CO. Now next come here, 20 out of 50. 20 out of 50. And here 20 out of 30. And here it is 6 out of 100. 6 out of 100. So what is the corresponding weightage here? 25% is the weightage. And how many marks does the students have got? 6 marks the students have got. So correspondingly, we will say that 25% of 6, 1.5 is for FAT. So definitely these in the CAT and in the internal assessment, this CO must have been attained, but in the FAT exam, this CO is not attained. So how do we usually take it is in the attainment, I'll show you here. Generally, it is 50% of the CAT and 50% of the FAT. And if you see CO1, that's the reason why I'll go here and show you again. We will finish all the 8 because 8 is a very small number. I want to just finish it off quickly. 40, 40, 40, 40, this is a good number. So I'll highlight which are looking bad and how many students I'm not satisfied. So here, this entire row I will highlight because in all the 3 assessments that are related to CO1, the student has not performed. Here, the student has performed in CAT1 and internal, but in fact, the attainment was not made. Here, the attainment was done in all the 3 categories. Here, the attainment was done because 50% we are trying to take 50% of what? The direct assessment from CO1. 50% of how many marks that I have given? 15 marks that I have given. Total weightage was for 15. So 30%. So I am trying to find out the individual weightage here. So when I take the individual weightage, 30% of 7 corresponds to some 4 marks or something. So this is also attained. So rest both are also attained. And come here, 18 is attained, 40, 40, these are also attained. 4, this is not attained. 26, 26, 26. Here, if you take 26 out of 25% of 26, if you take, you get around 6 marks. So this is also not attained because you are actually giving for 25 marks. So this is a problem again. 18 is attained, 92, everything is attained. So if you take entirely now, out of 8 students, there are 1, 2, and 3 students who have not attained that particular CO. So finally, you have a attainment percentage, which tells you that the attainment level is only 1.4. How did this final attainment come? This final attainment comes from 80% of these numbers that you take from the examination. Your examination you have conducted for 800 marks, and all these assessment setup that you have done corresponds to 80% of the weightage. The rest 20% comes from the indirect assessment. What is the indirect assessment? The indirect assessment talks about the surveys. I told you in the previous lectures, you take a survey and you find out for every CO, you can roll out a Google form at the end of the semester for all the 4 different COs that are highlighted here. And then you can ask on a scale of 1 to 5, how much do you think that you are satisfied or you have understood or you have followed a particular CO? Say, for example, CO1, there are around 75 students in the class. So I have taken this on a scale of 1 to 5, and the average is 3.89. Average is 3.89. And similarly, I'll do the same thing for CO2, CO3, and CO4. So on a scale of 5, the average is 3.89. So on a scale of 20, on a scale of 100, you just have to multiply this by 20 times. So approximately it is, I'll just take it as 78 approximately. So you will go here and this will give you the indirect attainment for CO1. It gives you the indirect attainment for CO1. So you go here for CO1, the indirect attainment is roughly 78. Likewise, you take the feedback from all of them and you calculate the indirect feedback. 20% of what you have done here for the 4 COs will be actually calculated for the CO attainment process. And accordingly, you will be able to tell whether a CO is satisfied or not. So looking into the marks here, CO3 and CO4 are satisfied because they came under attainment level 3. Why have they come under attainment level 3? It is importantly not because of indirect attainment assessment, but it's because of direct assessment where the attainment percentage was 62.5. I have told you that anything beyond 50 can be taken as level 2 if it is in between 50 to 60. Anything above 60 to 100 can be taken as level 3. So this is level 3. Level 3 means, yes, you have attained, you have satisfied this attainment, you have satisfied that CO. Now, anything below 40 is said to be level 1. So CO1 and CO2 are said to be not attained because they fall under level 1. And these two COs are not attained. So this is how you do the CO attainment process. Now coming to the PO attainment process, the PO attainment process comes up with something called as fidelity mapping. Fidelity means with how much clarity do you actually map the course outcomes to the program outcomes. Look at here. I will show you one example, one bad example and one good example. This is a bad example. CO1 is mapping to PO1 on a scale of 1 to 3. See, the scale is up to 1 to 3, okay? Level 1, level 2, level 3. Level 1 says that it is moderately mapped. Level 2 says that it is highly mapped. And level 3 says that it doesn't say about mapped, but it directly tells you that whatever the action verb that was used in PO is exactly the same in CO. So PO1, you might have used an action verb. Engineering PO1 talks about engineering knowledge. So you might have used one action verb there. The same action verb is coming here in CO1. Then you put level 3. A little bit of moderation and little bit of moderately mapped level 2 and level 1. If there is no synchronization between CO1 and PO1, then you will put a number 0. So let us talk about a bad example where CO1, what is CO1? Familiarization or explanation of the fundamentals of Internet of Things. And now if you go and see, it is mapped to PO1 on a scale of 1 to Ma'am, is it audible?
Yes, sir. Audible, sir. But I think
Correction
yes.
dropped out.
Yeah, yeah. You can share the screen, sir.
Sure.
Share the screen.
Now is it visible? Visible? Hello? Ma'am, are you able to see the screen?
Yes, sir. Program outcomes.
Yeah, you're able to see, no? Okay, thank you. So what I was talking about is, I was talking about CO1 and PO1. They are mapped as 3. The fidelity score was 3. But look at here, PO1 talks about application of the knowledge of maths, science, and fundamentals. So, did I take the same word called fundamental and application? Yes, in that CO1, we have both these terms, application and fundamentals. So that's the reason it is mapped as 3. But then, as we discussed, this cannot be application in CO1. So when you take it as explain or when you take it as familiarization of the fundamentals, then you cannot put it under PO1 as a scale of 3 because the same action verb is not appearing. So that's the reason why I took apply there. So apply is appearing in PO1. Similarly, your apply here was also appearing in CO1 when we considered this as an example, if you remember in this screenshot. Where is it? Yeah, here. Apply the fundamentals of Internet of Things. So apply was a word, fundamentals was also a word. These two words are taken as it is from the PO. So therefore, you get a score of 3. But then what did we do in today's lecture? We have revised this apply word and we have made it familiarize or we have made it explain the fundamentals. So in such case, the action verb doesn't match with the program outcome 1. In such cases, when it doesn't match with the program outcome 1, here you cannot put a scale, you cannot put a number 3, but rather, as I have shown in the next table here, it is suggestible that you put a number 1 or 2 depending upon how well you think that the CO meets the program outcome. So likewise, you prepare the CO and PO fidelity mapping table. This fidelity mapping table will help us for the attainment process because here you also have the PSOs that are mapped up, the 3 different PSOs that I have introduced you. So now let us go and go to this sheet again here. So if you see for this attainment setup, for this input where I have given this fidelity mapping score, only thing is for the timing, I'll just replace this 3 with 1 because that's what we have learned now. You see that the first PO, second PO, to whatever the POs that this course is linked to, you can find the numbers here, 1.5. So anything in between 2 and 3, you say that the CO or PO is attained. But anything which is less than 1 or in between 1 to 2, sorry, in between 1 to 2, you say that the POs have not been attained. So because I've given some random numbers here, so these POs are not attained for this course. PO9 is greater than 50%, so I won't take this. So the first 2 to 3 POs are said to be not attained for this course. So like that, what do we do is, this is a course on introduction to IoT. Like that, there may be around 10 to 15 faculty for that particular year for different slots or whatever. So like that, we'll take all the entire program outcomes for all the courses being floated in that program, and then take an average of all the POs. So let me say PO1 is 1.50 for this course. Let me say it is 1.8 for another course, 2.1 for another course, 2.3 for another course, and so on. The list all the courses that are there in your program. And finally, you take an average of all these things. And then you say that the program one, program outcome one is satisfied or not. So the mean of all these things. Here also, you can take direct and indirect attainments. Same is the case with PEOs and PSOs. One different case of PEO attainment I would like to talk about. PEO and PSO. PEOs and PSOs, you can actually understand them from this concept of capital T. What does this capital T tell you is the length and the depth. The depth tells you about your core competencies. Because if you can observe from slide 1 that I have told, the PSOs all very clearly talk about the core competencies, the core skills. So if you find out the formulation, I'll show you. And if you observe that the depth of this T is very long, you say that PSOs are more stronger in attainment. Or if you find that the T is more broader when compared to this length, then you say that your PEOs have been attained more. PEOs is more broad concept of core and non. Let's take an example. So there are 3 PSOs. The first PSO talks about jobs and placements. Very summarizedly, it is written here. Second PSO talks about the skills in higher education. If you remember yesterday's slide on student progression, there are 3 different opportunities. One is higher education, second is placement, third is entrepreneurship. All these 3 are written here. PSO 1 talks about placements, PSO 2 talks about higher education, PSO 3 talks about entrepreneurship. Now, when you do the attainment and find out that the PSO, I mean, the core values are very long, the T is having a larger depth, it indicates a huge opportunity for your program in higher education, employment, and entrepreneurship. Really, the first day, someone was asking a question on AI and ML being more preferred, and the other branches are becoming more dormant. As a teacher, as a educational member of the educational bodies, we must do this for every branch. Mechanical, if you take, electrical, if you take, there are huge opportunities, especially outside on renewable energy sector, or if you talk about mechatronics, or if you talk about automation, etc. But this can be understood by the students and the parents, especially in the induction programs. If you can do this attainment process and show them this, the length of this, depth of this PSO is so huge that it gives you so many opportunities, even after 5 years of graduation. That's what this statement says. For the first 1 to 5 years after graduation. It's just not artificial intelligence and machine learning. Because of this, there are 2 things that are happening. Because of this, I can tell you as no familiarization and unawareness. It is affecting the students' opportunities for the employment as well as the faculty opportunities as a teacher in thing. So this can be done. So now let us see. There are 3 levels here: level 1, level 2, and level 3. Level 1 of PSO attainment is average when you have only 1 statement of PSO. When you have 2 statements, you said to be it is good. 3 to 4 statements. 3 is ideal actually. 3 statements of PSOs is the best. So is it specific or is it talking about the stakeholders' point of view? So when we talk about 3 to 4 PSOs, then we can both include specific terms as well as stakeholder point of terms and include some Bloom's taxonomy, because whatever the 3 terms that I have written, they are very much generalized. But as I told you, you can bring up those 3 concepts here. So let's take an example. A simple switch, electrical switch. So you're taking up a course on switching theory. So the example is a simple switch, module 1. Remapping to this, the course outcome is the student must be able to know the concepts of must be able to tell us the mechanism of a switch. That's the outcome. For this, what is the program outcome is application of a switch. So how does the PEO and PSO take place? So we are going to talk about the opportunities. Once the student knows about the application of a switch, what are the opportunities that are there? There are many switch companies that take you for switches. So let me say Havells is one example. Promotion of higher order thinking questions in your question paper to meet these needs. So say for example, the first statement in your PSO talks about higher education and employability. Is it higher education or employability? I'll just go back. It's about job and placements. So it's about employability. So PSO1 is about employability. So the question in your question paper must be something like to test and validate the time switch. So you are giving a question on testing and validating the time switch. PSO1. So in the end, at the end of the question paper, you will say CO1/PSO1. Is it in the curriculum or not is another important point that you have to understand. Just like I told you, it's an introduction of IoT. It's a very introductory course. And if it is not in the curriculum or if it is not in the course syllabus, you cannot come up with some questions like testing and validation. So if it is not there, then there is a gap in the curriculum. There is a gap in the syllabus. So what the industry is expecting is not just numerical computation or some mechanism of a switch, but the industry outside is expecting you to test and validate their switches. So for which it is not there in your curriculum. If it is not there in your curriculum, once again, you cannot add it as a question in your question paper. So what you have to do is whenever the next POS in the AC meetings, you have to propose some creation of some self modules or some open book learnings, which can once again be a formative assessments so that the student comes to know about the testing and validation of the switch, which is the need of the industry. The need of the industry, need of the nation and society must be reflected in the PSOs. If they are not there in the examination, then there is a scope for it to induce it in the curriculum by proposing some open hours or self-module exercises or formative assessments for the students so that this can come and reflect in the attainment process. PSO2 talks about higher education. So maybe in the higher education perspective, like examinations on GATE or any other examination, entrance level examination, they generally ask about computation skills. They test and they check your numerical and competency skills. So this will definitely be there in the question paper, but what you give in the questions is not about, because once again, it's an introductory course on elementary switching mechanisms that you have taught to the student. The student may not be familiarized about high level numerical computations. So whatever the question paper that you give for the student is just generally limited to Bloom's taxonomy 2, which is lower level of thinking. What is Bloom's taxonomy level 2? It is about explanation, description, discussion, understanding, etc. That's what the mechanism of a switch says. So you say CO2, map it to PSO2, and then the question is discuss the mechanism of a switch. But then when the student goes and prepares for the competitive examinations, he may be come up with some question on what is the transient or what is the performance of a switch under these so and so conditions. So for which he needs a numerical computation skill. So what you can do is, once again, you have identified the gap with the curriculum. So the gap is the Bloom's taxonomy level 2 is not sufficient. You have to go and reach the fourth Bloom's taxonomy level, which specifically talks about application and analysis skills. So for which what you can do once again, if once again there is no scope for you to include it in the final exam or a part of your summative assessment, formative assessment is the best method for employability. You can create an open book test with Bloom's taxonomy level 4 and you can give it as a practice for your internal assessments. The best thing that you can do is if you find any curriculum gap with your syllabus copy and you think that there is no autonomy, I am unable to do anything, formative assessment is the best tool for a teacher. So that what happens from this is we can able to develop and attain the program specific outcomes as well. So what are the benefits of such an OBE framework practice? in the last 3 lectures, we have seen a very basic introductory level of what outcome-based education is and how we as a teachers must be geared up to reach the expectations of the teaching learning process, especially when the national education policy talks about radical changes in the learning outcomes. So we have to be there to address some of the following questions. What do we want the students having or they have to be able to do? So the answer to the first part of the question is your question paper and your result analysis. But what will they be able to do is what the NEP 2020 document says about communication skills, a contribution to SD, Sustainable Development Goal number 4, and also lifelong learning. Are you actually inculcating this being a teacher? What the student will be able to do? That we must be able to understand. Only then we will be contributing to the outcome-based education. The second thing is how best we help the students achieve it. As I was talking about in the yesterday's class on assessment and evaluation also, even if we don't have the autonomy or something like that, we can actually take the internal assessment as the best tool for us to help the students to achieve it. And how well we know whether the students have achieved it or not. For that particular purpose, we have outcome-based education, which specifically talks about COPO attainment. So first lecture, second lecture, and third lecture. And finally, how do we close the loop for further improvement? When you follow the first 3 methods, obviously there will be further improvement, and thus further improvement will lead to a continual improvement. And as I told you, it is just not you as a teacher in this battle for continual improvement. Behind you, there is internal quality assurance. Behind internal quality assurance, there is the central team of administration who actually looks about all these things. And behind that, there is always Ministry of Education and government portals with us to help you in every aspect. So in conclusion, your benefits will be you have a more dedicated and coherent curriculum. Coherence is a word I have taken from NEP document, and the graduates will be more relevant to the industry rather than just rote learning. They will be able to contribute to the society, and there will be well-made graduates, which the stakeholders also expect. So with this, I would like to thank you everyone for your kind attention, and it was very nice interacting with you in this 2-week workshop. Thank you so much for your attention.
So thank you. Sir, shall we take questions?
Yes, ma'am.
Is it program specific outcome or objectives, sir?
Program specific outcomes.
Outcomes or objectives.
Program educational objectives. PEO, program educational objectives. Program specific outcomes.
What is the difference between objective and outcome, sir?
A very good question. Very good question. For this, I will first show you this and later explain you. I'll tell it to you in 2 different ways. Whatever that we see here, actually this should be yes, okay. Program specific. In our question papers, generally if you have this practice, you take CO mapping, PO mapping, and at the end of the question paper, you have a table that tells you CO, PO, and PSO, because all these words come up to O's, O's, and O's, outcomes, outcomes, outcomes. But then objective is one for which you have prepared this course as a whole. That for this objective is for the teacher, it's like a light for us to train them in this particular category after the end of the course. See, in this, you see the objectives after the end of the course, after the end of the course, after the end of the course, or this course will help you. So how does this course will be beneficial to the student? And in this process, what are my points that I have to transfer to the student? So this is our bookmark for a teacher. But whereas from a student perspective and his holistic development point of view, outcomes are more important. So the student will be able to implement. When will he be able to implement? Only when the teacher comes up with an objective to inculcate the foundations, or not this, to give an overview of the end-to-end systems. So objectives and outcomes, they both are very much related, but there is a small line. Objectives are more from a teacher perspective, outcomes are more from a student perspective and a stakeholder perspective.
Sir, Professor Dr. J. Venugopal has texted, in some units, there are some lengthy topics which are important also. In such situation, how to limit the COs? In some units, there are some lengthy topics.
That's
which
what
are
I have told you,
important.
sir. Yesterday's lecture, there was one point that I have made very clear, that the COs need not be lengthy. The topics may be lengthy, but because the topics are there, there are very lengthy topics. It's not that you have to incorporate everything in the CO. All these lengthy topics that are there in the particular module are meant for a particular purpose. Let me say, the student comes up with, for example, I deal with microwave engineering, and I see, I cannot show you here, but in the syllabus copy, module 4, the syllabus is so written that the student must be able to, module 4, the designing of power dividers are there. In power dividers, there is Wilkinson power divider, resistive, non-resistive, E-plane T, H-plane T, and also designing rat race coupler, directional coupler. As a faculty, you must be able to understand all these things come under the classification or umbrella of power dividers. So there may be very lengthy topics in your module or in your course, but then all these become power dividers. So you can come up with an outcome saying that the student must be able to design a power divider for installing in the television sets or installing in some satellite purpose, etc. So entire thing crisp. That too, having those three components, verb should be there. What is the main important part here? Although there may be several lengthy parts, power divider is the only classification that we can make. And finally, where it is used, television purpose or maybe satellite communication purpose, etc. Make sure that these three words are there in your statement and make a meaningful statement out of these three words. Your CO is done. It need not be lengthy. However lengthy may be your syllabus or maybe lengthy may be your topics.
Sir, Professor Dr. Mallareddy texted, sir, are there any tools to calculate the direct assessment and indirect assessment of PO calculation?
Tools specifically, sir, as far as I have seen, most of the colleges, they come up with their own formulas for calculating it. Some of the colleges, like we also have this Excel sheet with us, there was very much brainstorming session that we have done, because you might be knowing it's a relatively new university. Only 3 students have graduated, 3 batches have graduated so far. So there was some brainstorming session right from 2021 after COVID outbreak until 2022. We have come up with this Excel sheet, especially Professor Srikanth and I have worked on it. So you can come up with such kind of an automative system that gives you the outcomes, attainment of the outcomes directly. Or how is this Excel sheet work? This Excel sheet directly works on basic mathematical formulas behind. So you can draft some mathematical formulas and you can actually use them in some MATLAB programming or something as well. That also can be done.
Do we have to follow any procedure to decide the target value of each PO and PSO?
Is that the question, ma'am? Do we
Yes,
have
sir.
to follow the lengthy
Do
procedure?
we have to follow any procedure to decide the target value of each PO and PSO?
Yeah, there is no procedure as such. The decision-making authority is with the deans or course coordinators or whoever at your college is. I will tell you that if it is an introductory level course, as I have shown you here, then it can be around 60 to 70, because most of the students will be able to answer very well. So you can have a higher threshold and higher target for it. But if it is a very complex course which has more mathematical equations, and specifically some courses may be open book examination and all, then in such cases you can make the target a little less, like 40 to 50 you can put the target. So this target depends upon the contents in the course and its intensity.
Sir, thank you so much. Thank you so much. And even the participants also, like they have given thank you for very informative and knowledgeable session. So they are, thank you, sir. Very informative session. Thank you for
Thank you
your
so much.
informative, sir.
Thank you
Thank you,
so
sir,
much.
once again.
And I thank CBR College again and all the organization members, especially Swapna ma'am, who was behind us in conducting this. And also thank you to my professor, Dr. Edukonu, and everyone who is there. Thank you so much, all the participants. I hope to see you again in the next sessions.
Thank you all. Please wait for the photo session. I request all the participants to turn on the camera. Please stop sharing the screen.
Yeah. I have stopped sharing this.
Yeah, I request all the participants to please turn on their camera.
Still it is sharing?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, is my screen in the share mode?
Still you're sharing your desktop, sir.
Okay, yeah.
No, it's fine, sir. Once again, I request all the participants to please turn on their camera. Thank you so much, sir. You can leave the session.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much.